fine now. Don't worry about it. No. Move. We're coming to you live from Cape Town, the mother city, the 25th edition of the World Economic Forum on Africa. And we've seen them all today with our presidential correspondent, Zwandile Mbeje. And we've seen all the delegates today. Patrice Motsepe, African Rainbow Minerals representative, one of the co-chairs, the head of Barclays, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, our former deputy president. She's one of the co-chairs, laying out their expectations. And we will be going live to President Jacob Zuma in a little while. He's there. We've seen the visuals at the plenary session. He will be doing the official opening. So even though some of the meetings got underway yesterday, there's already been sessions this morning. The president only doing the official opening. And what are your expectations on what he's going to say?
And thank you very much. Welcome to the viewers. This is one of the most important gatherings. You know, still it's an informal gathering, so no binding decisions come out of here. But the fact that the kind of people that meet here are your opinion makers, are your captains of industry, and many political leadership, future and former, so to speak. It's one of those networks which bring people together. So when they talk issues that affect the globe, they can be able to then share ideas, and then how do we navigate the difficulties that we face. So we expect one of the issues that will come up very strongly, especially, you know, on our continent, we need growth, but there's no growth without infrastructure. One of the things that will feature, in fact, I think in the session, the first session that will start, you will hear more on infrastructure. Definitely, and let's go straight there. We're hearing from Mr. Schwab at the moment, the founder, very integral to the World Economic Forum. Let's go inside that session now.
ANC was represented at the time by Thabo Mbeki, Tito Mboweni, and so on. This was the first meeting of the party leaders, and certainly an important step in the reconciliation process and transformation process of this country. After this first meeting, I went in 1991 to South Africa to meet the leaders. At that time, President de Klerk, Nelson Mandela, and Chief Buthelezi. And I remember, Mr. President, I came here at a day of big demonstrations. And for me, coming from safe Switzerland, it was quite unusual to pass my way to the Shell House to meet Nelson Mandela in the midst of so many people protesting. The result was that Nelson Mandela, president at that time, de Klerk, and Chief Buthelezi came to Davos in '92 to show the world that a new South Africa, a new Africa, is born. Then in '93, we held the first meeting here in Cape Town. And I still remember when Nelson Mandela, who was elected the year afterwards to be president of South Africa, of the Republic of South Africa, presented his economic program and ensured foreign investors that they would be welcome in South Africa. Since that time, the Forum has not only organized a summit each year, alternating between Cape Town and other African cities. We had the honor and chance to welcome many South African leaders at our annual meeting in Davos. But what is even more important, it's not only the integration of South African leadership into global affairs. It is the fact that we have contributed through action to the development of this great continent. I just want to mention some of the initiatives which had an impact. Initiatives where we were catalyzer or supporters. For example, Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccination and Immunization of Children, which was born thanks to the Gates Foundation in Davos. The Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria, which also had its origin in Davos. And I could add many other initiatives like the initiative Grow Africa, which met here and which is contributing so much to the agricultural development. But it's not only through the manifold initiatives, infrastructure, education, sustainable energy, which we have undertaken and which brought us closer to the continent. It's also the fact that we have created communities we are very proud of. We have so many great social entrepreneurs in Africa with a direct impact on the lives of hundreds of millions of people. And we will celebrate some of those at the end of this plenary session. But also, I'm proud of our young global leaders and our global shapers, the young generation. We feel now, as an official international institution for public-private cooperation, we have to integrate the young generation. And the World Economic Forum is now represented in each African country by a hub or a group of global shapers. Please, global shapers and young global leaders, identify yourself by raising your hands. If Africa is today a continent of hope, of realistic hope, you are the generation driving forward and making this hope a reality. At the end of my short introduction and reflection on this very special day, and you see how much I'm personally, emotionally involved, I just want to thank. I want to thank the governments which had trust and confidence in us from the beginning on, particularly you, President Zuma. I want to thank our members and partners sitting here in the room, which made it all possible. Now, I want to ask Ilse Kansa, our director, senior director for Africa, who is actually the African heart inside the World Economic Forum, to introduce us to our summit 2015. Elsie, please join me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Schwab. Excellencies, esteemed co-chairs, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Kunjani, how's it? Bonjour, habari za asubuhi, bom dia, salam alaikum. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 25th World Economic Forum on Africa. We have broken many records this year, including the total number of participants, number of youth, number of women, number of international businesses, number of televised sessions, which means we're much more open to the rest of Africa and the world, and the list goes on and on. This is significant because it underscores the weight that Africans and Friends of Africa attached to coming together to collectively explore how to make the most of the opportunities and to tackle the wicked problems that the continent faces in its march towards prosperity for all. 2015 is an important milestone in Africa's journey, primarily because there are a number of critical global meetings taking place where Africa is a critical stakeholder and main beneficiary. The post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals in New York, Financing for Development in Addis, COP21 in Paris, and the World Trade Organization meeting in Nairobi. Many have expressed that it is difficult to imagine 25 years in the future. For typical African parents expecting a child over the next 9 months, they can imagine whether or not the mother-to-be will survive childbirth. They can imagine whether or not the child or the baby will live to celebrate their 5th birthday. They can imagine whether or not their child will be able to get into primary school. They can imagine whether or not their child will fail to pass exams and drop out of school. They can imagine whether or not their teenager will be accepted in university. They can imagine whether or not their trained young adult will get a job or not. 25 years is imaginable, especially when negative outcomes are the norm. As a young African woman and poster child for the next generation of leaders, I'm both thrilled and terrified about receiving the baton from the generation of leaders who drove the agenda for a democratic dividend and planted the seeds for Africa's economic transformation. In turn, with my cohorts, we are challenged to drive the agenda for a demographic dividend and make this century truly Africa's century. This session is about addressing the hopes and fears of the next generation of leaders by weighing in on the benefits of hindsight from the current generation of leaders. On that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our host, His Excellency Jacob Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa, Sawubona President, Siyabonga Ngosizo Olukle Labantu Nohulumeni Womzansi Afrika. Karibu sana Mheshimiwa Rais.
Thank you very much, Director of the Program. Thank you, our good sister, Professor Schwabs, Vice President of Ghana, ministers and deputy ministers. As you realize, there's more light here, lesser light there. So if I don't see you and I don't recognize you, don't think I'm discriminating. I just recognize the Prime Minister of Swaziland, Kingdom of Swaziland. I might not be seeing some other people. So all important personalities who are here, you are warmly welcomed. Indeed, Professor, and everyone, the captains of industry, you're welcome to South Africa, a wonderful country, a beautiful country, but also to Cape Town, one of the beautiful cities that you can find in the world. I won't tell the story because I don't have time why it is so wonderful. One day I will have time, I'll tell you why. But we are welcomed warmly once again to be here in the conference of the World Economic Forum, an important forum for all of us in the globe that connects us. I share the sentiments with the professor with regards to 25 years of linking up. I'm sure many of you will remember that South Africa at the time was expecting something to happen. Leaders of the liberation movement had been released from prison, particularly our icon Nelson Mandela. we're starting a process of negotiations. Nobody knew what would be the outcome. People are holding their breaths and everything to say what is going to happen in South Africa. It was at that time that we made the link, which has remained for so many years. We always welcome when the forum meets here, because Africa connects with the globe, so to speak. This year, Professor, is a very special year for us as a country. We are celebrating one of our historic policy documents that shaped the vision of the South African people, what type of country we wanted. It's 60 years since the adoption of the Freedom Charter. To us, the Freedom Charter is not for a party, but it's for the people of South Africa. It was crafted by the people of this country. And they had something to say in the preamble of the Freedom Charter. And as you know, it has clauses that began to say what type of a country we want. But they make a very important statement, because South Africa at the time was under racial domination. And people of South Africa said, we, the people of South Africa, declare for all to know that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and that no government could justly claim authority unless it was based on the will of the people. A very profound statement that was made, and that's why we celebrate this document that guided us to our democracy. But we're also, this month, celebrating the contribution of the youth in our struggle. June is the Youth Month in our country. And it is therefore pleasing that you are interacting with the youth this morning. In our history, youth has played a very important role in helping to contribute in shaping the future of South Africa. And we are very confident that the youth is going to continue to do so. And therefore the discussions this morning will be a contribution to that direction of the youth. Yes, Africa at one point was subjugated, colonized. It fought to liberate itself politically. But we all agree that as one of our great leaders in the continent, Kwame Nkrumah, said that political freedom is not enough without economic freedom. So the issues that we deal with these days is how to shape ourselves economically. And therefore, to participate in the World Economic Forum gives us that platform, which we believe is very important, particularly when Africa has harmonized its thinking about where it must go. We have a vision as a continent, and I think a number of countries have their own visions. So we hope that these 3 days are going to give us an opportunity, a platform to exchange views, to indicate the opportunities in the continent, because we believe our continent is part of the globe. We believe that the relations between Africa and the world has to change. We have to deal with one another as equals. And we believe that our interaction will help us to arrive there. So we are welcome to this kind of wonderful interaction. Here, we don't have the ice. We have the sun. If not the sun, the rain. Yesterday, we were just reminding you that we can also produce something rather than the sun. So welcome, enjoy Cape Town. Thank you very much.
So we will now immediately go into the discussion, into the dialogue. We had a process to determine questions, statements via social media, so many people were involved, and we have some spokespeople talking on behalf of the young leaders here in the room, but talking also on behalf of those who express themselves via social media. Now, may I ask, I don't know who wants to be first, to get up and to introduce yourself and to raise your question or to make your comment.
Good morning to the panel. My name is Lynette Nduli. I represent the Global Shapers, and more specifically, the Global Shapers Hub in Durban, South Africa. My question to the panel this morning is this. We know that today Africa is the world's youngest continent if we consider that the median age of our youth is 19. We also know that by 2040, 50% of the world's overall population will be young people in Africa. Whilst we note the increase in our population, we also note with some concern the increase in young people who are unemployed on the continent. We speak of economic inequality, but we often don't link it to the inequality to education as well as access to skills. How do our governments best decrease the skills gap and at the same time help us to increase the access as well as the pipeline of young people who can now enter meaningful work as well as the mainstream economy of the world? Thank you.
Thank you for this very crucial question. Mr. President, Vice President, the floor is yours.
Let me start and let President Zuma conclude for us. At the beginning of the process, we had a question whether Africa, were there hopes or fears. I think that in the last 25 years, there's been a substantial convergence of political systems, of economic systems, and therefore, as President Zuma said, there's a large amount of harmony in the systems that we have. We have hope because in the last 25 years, we have made the mistakes. Africa has made the mistakes. Now we learn from those mistakes and we go forward in hope. So that's how I'll preface my comments. We have in the last 25 years we've had also political developments that also have led to convergence. We have political parties in Africa that have common positions, and therefore elections have become very close because we all believe in the same things. And that's what, when President Zuma talks about harmony, the harmony of the policies, harmony in the way we identify the issues. So how do we proceed from the stable political system that we have, from a judiciary that is increasingly independent and is able to take major decisions irrespective of which people are in power? There's increasing gender equality in Africa. So how do we leverage on these positives for the future? And this morning I've been part of a group, of a panel that has looked at Africa. The numbers of people who are being educated are the highest in Africa. 90% of people are going through school, but 50% of them after high school don't have employable skills. So that is what we need to do. We have to provide them with entrepreneurial training. We have to provide them with access to credit. We have to make them part of the formal system. And that is what I see as the progress that we can make. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. President Zuma.
Well, thank you very much, Professor. Well, the question is very important because it centers around the youth. I think the youth is our main target as societies, because if we talk about education, really is meant for the young people in the main, because they should be part of shaping the future. If they are not embraced by what is happening today, and if we say they will only participate in future, then we are missing the point. They ought to be part of all the programs that we deal with today, particularly because they've got everything that you need. The issue of the youth, I think, is a challenge. And if we talk about, for an example, the unemployment of the youth is a general, global problem. But of course, regions are not the same. Africa may not be necessarily the same like in Europe, which was developed a long time ago. We still have to focus on the youth, to look at what do we do 40 or 2040, 2050. I think that's the reason why at the AU level we have come up with a vision, 2063. We have come up with the programs that are beginning to open up more possibilities for the young people. We are creating the infrastructure. We are connecting Africa more than ever before so that the youth participates in that process in shaping the future. We believe that if the young people at 2040 or 2050 will be the majority, they ought to be in a better position to lead, and we should prepare them now. It means they should be employed. We should create opportunities. But of course, Africa does have a disadvantage that part of its history, unlike in other regions, perhaps not all, we were in a different kind of a situation. We were colonized. We could not decide on our own what we need to do. I think that gap tells today, when we deal with how do we move forward, it needs all of us to come together, to work to ensure that we have very clear programs that give the youth a role to play. But they must also be empowered. We must inculcate in our youth not only those who want to be qualified to get better employment, but we must create entrepreneurs out of them so that they themselves are able to create jobs. It is absolutely important that the youth participation in whatever we do is visible, is effective, because they're shaping their own future. I was saying we have a June in South Africa, which is a youth month. It acknowledges the role played by the youth in the struggle. And they did play a role, not only as soldiers or whatever, but also as shaping the thinking of the country, of the organization, but also being ready to participate. They were not saying, we will then do it when we grow up. But they were saying, here we are ready to participate. When we called for volunteers, they were there as volunteers to be in the forefront. What we are faced with now, because the world has developed, is how do we empower our youth to a level where they are part of the leadership that emerges from now. And we should not be afraid these days for the youth to participate in the leadership positions. I think the days are gone where you could say only old people will lead because they've got an experience. Because today people are empowered and they should be part of it. I don't think we should create a gap between today and the future with regards to the participation of the youth. And the youth, therefore, should be conscious that they should come in and we should receive them with warm hands, that they should be part of the processes. Thank you.
It's very encouraging what we heard, and I think your last point, to empower young people to become entrepreneurs. Africa is a very creative continent in principle. And just to show you the significance of this issue, If you put it into an international context, there's estimations that every year 18 million jobs have to be created just to absorb those who are coming to the job market in Africa. And another figure is that according to some estimates, by 2040, 50% of the world's youth population will be African. It just shows the gigantic challenge to create employment, and I would add self-employment. And self-employment, I come back to the importance of social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in general. Let's go to the second question, please.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Musitwa, and I'm a young global leader from Zambia and Uganda, and currently living in Kenya. I run a law firm called Hoja Law Group, and one of the areas of law that we practice is intellectual property. And so jumping on the idea of job creation and also entrepreneurship, I wanted to ask what policies you have in place to encourage entrepreneurship and also innovation. Because right now there definitely is a rise of young people that are creating and innovating, but what policies do you have in place to protect those innovations and also allow youth to export those innovations to the rest of the world? Thank you.
You're asking President Zuma.
That's both leaders' names.
Well, I think we have the laws in our country that are dealing with the question of how to protect property. And these laws cover all citizens. What I think we need to be looking at is the innovation that is coming in. Are we dealing with the new kind of initiatives that are being taken? And this is what we are trying to do. That's why we've got very specific youth programs. But again, we would want the youth itself to participate. Because as you correctly say, you are involved in particular activities that must come to the fore. Because for us to be encouraged or to know that there are specific things that need to be protected, that need to be given space, it is because we are part of it. We know what is happening. Because if we don't know, it's going to be difficult to say what are the laws that we create for this one. So that's why I was emphasizing earlier that the joint participation between the youth and the society at large becomes important to inform whatever we do. We shouldn't be thinking like yesterday's, when today you are doing something that are very forward-looking, and we shouldn't be looking backwards. So that's why it is important that we work together to ensure that what are the things that need to be done in order to ensure that your space is protected, what you do is given a platform so that we are able to move forward. We emphasize on the youth, and the programs will certainly come together because we are part of the same kind of activity.
Vice President.
Yes, I think part of the reason we are here is also to listen to new ideas for us to take back home. So we don't have, if I don't have an answer for a specific question that you ask, it's because I'm here also to learn from you. We have a number of initiatives in Ghana to address the issue that you raised. We have a youth enterprise support program that seeks to create entrepreneurs out of youth. We have new universities that are very innovative, and we have people who have written computer programs that maybe need to be protected, and they have to learn how this is. But the government is providing resources for doing some of these things, for the enterprise development and for training the youth in skills that are not there, especially in the technical vocational areas and so on. And The problem is the scale. The numbers of unemployed youth are many. The educational system is throwing out people who can read but cannot use their hands to the extent that we want. And to transform them from being just literate to being both numerate and technically competent is the challenge that we face. And so we are making an effort. We need support. I see that the outgoing president of the African Development Bank is here. We'll need the support of the African Development Bank to support national governments that want to do things like that, so that we will be able to develop the enterprising youth.
I think what has been mentioned, skills development is key, and skills development requires to pay special attention to the educational system. And as we see at the World Economic Forum, we will have a revolution in education mainly based on the usage of new technological means. So Africa should embrace this opportunity, leapfrog, in terms of creating educational systems which really fosters the skills for tomorrow. But this means to pay attention very much to the schools, and very often, at least I speak out of European experience, the biggest blockage are the teachers to embrace this change and to embrace those new opportunities. Any comment on this issue?
Yes, of course, we do have a lot of programs that deal with the skills. We've got a very specific program insofar as the youth is concerned, because we have a history that the majority of the youth in our country were not given that possibility. So we are very strong on skills development to give the youth that opportunity. We are looking at education as an important platform to deal with that. Even the young workers, we also say, even at the factory floor, there are programs that help them to enhance their skills, even if they are already working. Because we believe that the skills will be the instrument for us to take the country forward, not just for them as individuals, but for the country, to have an empowered youth that is able, therefore, to take us from where we are to forward to the future.
Thank you. Let's move to the next question or comment, please.
Good morning. My name is Anton Duplessis. I'm South African. I'm a young global leader, and I'm with the Institute for Security Studies, which is a Pan-African organization that aims to enhance human security and rule of law in Africa. It's encouraging this week to see how prominently the question of governance features on the agenda. And indeed, good governance is a prerequisite for sustainable and inclusive economic growth and development. And what I'd like to know is, what are your plans to enhance governance, accountability, and transparency within government? And in particular, what are the plans to improve the fight against systemic corruption at all levels? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that good governance is a general term. For us, it's decentralization, political decentralization, administrative decentralization, fiscal decentralization, so that people at lower levels of the system are able to get involved in the decision making as to resource allocation. So it has been the core of our policy in the last 25 years to decentralize authority to lower levels in the political system, in communities and so on. So that is one. Secondly, we encourage the role of civil society organizations in this, and they're both formal and informal ways. In the informal, we all understand. In the formal ways, some of our laws have allowed for the creation of a public interest accountability committees. For example, in our new oil petroleum sector, the law allows for a public interest accountability committee to be made up of people from outside of government who look at the way the resources are used and every 6 months write a report that addresses the issues that they see in there. So those are the ways in which you can guarantee that the system is transparent. A lot of information is available around, and the ICT allows for a lot more information on the activities of government that can get critiqued by various people, and also to mobilize public opinion if they don't like the decisions that come out of central government or from Parliament. So it is the transparency that also then provides the information that is available, that provides the key answer to the question of corruption. Because if you open procurement systems to public interest accountability committees, for example, who are appointed by NGOs without government interference, who are funded by government, be able to do their work, it is a key in the battle against corruption and maladministration.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, I think we all believe in the good governance. That's an issue we talk about, particularly in the continent of Africa, but also to individual governments. Just starting from the broader continental issue, we have established an institution or a forum which we call the peer review mechanism in Africa. And this is a very important system wherein the countries in the continent voluntarily join this institution, which allows your peers to review you and look at how your government is going. And the membership of this is now more than those who are not members. And countries are continuing to join so that they can say, this is how we run our countries, and look at us. And you can be critical and say you are not doing very well here. When the report is being looked at the level of the AU, countries are very critical of what we are doing. This is now opening it in the continent. It is in keeping with the belief that we are changing Africa into a very democratic kind of region. But coming to the specific countries, if we take South Africa, we have a very strong anti-corruption culture that we have developed, which was never there before. People in South Africa talk more about this, and the government has established a lot of institutions that are fighting corruption, including the public has a right to go to the public protector. They've got the right to raise issues very openly. Many things we do, we try to bring the element of transparency so that people are aware of what is happening. And it's a culture that was not there before. People have been arrested, some are serving in prison, some have lost jobs, because there is an anti-corruption kind of culture that is there, and government, of course, is expected to play a particular role. We have looked at other things, for an example, in terms of how things like you give out things like tenders. And because we did the opposite, allowed people at different levels, for an example of government, to take decisions. In the process of looking at the corruption, we've come to realize that that spreads the possibility of corruption. We have actually looked at how do we centralize tender system, for an example, so that you are in a platform where you could look at it rather than allowing it to be everywhere. That's part of what we are trying to do to fight corruption. We believe in it, and the actions that have been taken against those who are corrupt. We have got parliament that discusses these matters. no matter how small the issue is or how big the issue is, people want to see the law taking its course. They also want to see what decisions are taken at the end of those kind of investigations. We've got special structures that investigate very deeply the corruption that happens, particularly in government. I think we are more active in government, although even in the private sector there are some activities, but there are more with the public employees of public activities. There is more focus and more feeling that the taxpayers' monies cannot be taken by other people. But it is a problem that it is always addressed. There is no issue that is left, and it does not matter whether you are small or you're big. If there is a problem, we have structures to look at it, structures to investigate. They investigate, even the president here is investigated thoroughly if there's anything wrong. That's how open the system is.
Thank you. Let's move to the next question. I may give, if we have time, to the questioners afterwards an opportunity to follow up. But let's move to the next question, please, or comment.
Thank you, Professor. My name is Bright Simmons. I'm a young global leader from Ghana and working in the area of the use of technology to improve upon health outcomes, particularly the area of medicine supply chains. Which brings me to my question, which is that by 2050, some very credible estimates suggest that Africa's population may double to beyond 2 billion. This is an incredible change, and the impact on the environment is obviously going to be incredibly transformative. Part of that will include competition among species, and certainly the changes in the environment will have an effect on the frequency of pandemics. We've already seen that in malaria, in HIV, in tuberculosis, etc. Urbanization will certainly accelerate these trends. But what we did see with the Ebola pandemic in particular were new avenues to fight disease. Business leaders, particularly in the telecom industry, came together to use their platform to mobilize new sources of resources to fight the disease. My question to the leaders is, what are the other trends that you see in the healthcare landscape in Africa that you believe will make Africa a more effective continent in fighting pandemics? Thank you.
Vice President, you have been directly involved
in the Ebola.
Yeah.
Yes, we saw an incredible commitment from the leadership in Ebola. Our government decided that it was better to fight the Ebola where it was than to wait for it to come to. And many other governments took similar positions. The European governments, other African governments made that commitment. And they made a sacrifice of sending healthcare workers from our countries to the countries that had Ebola, so that they had, at the same time, some possibilities of learning how to treat and cure those those who have suffered from the virus. There's also both the political and economic mobilization that took place as a result of this threat. And so I'm seeing that whenever there's a common threat, we get together and combine to tackle it. I don't know whether as incomes increase, whether the birth rates will continue at this rate. I hope that as our societies get more urbanized, we're seeing a reduction in the rate of growth of the population. And so maybe it won't be 2 billion, it'll be fewer, higher quality of care, of health status than we have now. Because there's also studies that show that when people have higher incomes, they take better care of their health and so on. So it is not all gloom. I'm saying two things, that both the Ebola and the current other malaria and HIV shows that the political commitment comes the leadership exercises incredible mobilization of resources and commitment when these things happen. And I'm sure that we'll be up to the task when other pandemics arise. Thank you.
I think we should express our admiration for how it was handled. This was one of the very positive signs out of Africa, the resilience at the end, in view of a major, what some doomsayers said it would be a major global catastrophe, which was contained.
Yes, it was contained. The fear every morning waking up was when the social media claimed that there was an Ebola case in Ghana, was that would be blamed for bringing something that wasn't there by allowing the UN to set up in Accra in order to tackle this. But I think that there's a lot of professionalism in the way these people worked, and we're happy that both in Liberia particularly.
Vice President, I think it was also a good demonstration of public-private cooperation and multi-stakeholder cooperation.
To continue.
May we, Mr. President, may we switch immediately to the next question, or do you want to?
No, just a bit on this one. Firstly, I think we should express our gratitude to those who supported us in the continent when Ebola in particular came. I think the question is very important because it says, are we ready to address the bigger population in the continent that would have been doubled by the time, particularly from the medical point of view? I think that Ebola was an awakening call to all of us with regards to epidemics that would come at any given time. I think we handled it, I think from a very, at first, not well prepared continent or region to deal with this, but we were able to deal with it. We contained it, and we should also really praise our brothers and sisters in West Africa because they worked on this very, very hard. I think the issue that comes back is, what is it that we must always look at and prepare beforehand? There are two critical things that faces all of us. Is firstly, the empowering of our citizens. Education is critical. It's a matter that we need to work on very seriously. But secondly, is the health of our citizens. I think our medical organizations decided this time around to do more in the area of research, in terms of pandemics, to be ready for any eventuality. I think, and I'm hoping that the AU will actually take this matter more seriously, to say, how do we organize ourselves in our medical professions to ensure that once that time comes, we are ready to tackle any other pandemic that could come. It's a matter that we are discussing at the leadership. It's a question of how do we implement the real organization and strengthen the health organization of the continent to focus on this specific, particularly the research, which must research not only to diagnose, but how to bring the cures. So it is an important matter. I think the question that is being asked is very important because it is an important thing that the population is healthy and we need to be ready for that. Many things we need to address because there's a problem of the cost of medicine globally, which is an important thing for citizens, but it's a thing that is very difficult. It means the poor people suffer all the time. They might die when they would not have died if they had the means. These are matters we need to take into account as we try to create a defensive kind of situation. We believe preventing sicknesses from coming in is better than curing them. And that's what our medical professionals should be looking at.
It was a wake-up call, and I think you you have the message, but it needs also international cooperation. It has to be integrated into an international framework. No continent, no country can deal with a major epidemics alone. Yes. Let's, in view of the time, let me combine two questions. Let's move the next two questions.
Good morning. My name is Lilian Sachelela Madeje. I'm a global shaper from the Dar es Salaam hub in Tanzania. Our continent is currently facing complex and disruptive geopolitical, geoeconomic, and technological changes. At the same time, there is a rise in social tension, such as has been evidenced in Burkina Faso and Burundi. What must be done to ensure Africa's future leaders, its youth, are equipped to handle and respond to such changes? Thank you.
It's such an important question, so let's deal with it. And Vice President, your country was particularly mentioned.
No, she mentioned Burkina Faso and Burundi.
And apologies, Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Burundi. Thank you.
But clearly, yes, there are tensions of expectation, there are tensions that are created because of youth unemployment, there's tension of urbanization. There are also religious and other developments of people who have not participated in the growth and development that have taken place in our societies, who are protesting, want to bring everything down because they are not participating in it. So my quick response is that, yes, development programs must be inclusive. And then they have a share in the society and are responsible for securing that society. So there are many aspects of it. There are specific reasons why in the countries that you mentioned, why this has become a problem. But I know that in the ECOWAS there was an attempt to at the regional level, at the sub-regional level, to determine that third terms of a two-term limit for all presidents. And that may be a solution that will bring an end to this kind of agitation. So I know that the AU will be meeting in a couple of days here in Joburg, and hope that that discussion will take place, how to avert this the kind of tension that arises from feeling that administrations want to succeed themselves. And let me quote what President Zuma said at the beginning in his opening remarks, there's quite substantial harmony about political systems and the way forward. And maybe you have a few outliers that do not define what Africa is doing. And what Africa is doing is what I think we should continue to do.
President Zuma, you want to add?
Yes, a bit. Well, I think the question is very important. I think we've moved in Africa from a distance where we thought we were really getting rid of tensions and other things. But it is clear that some of the things have come back. If you take the conflicts that have come, but I think what is important, they are not of the same nature. What provokes tensions in other areas are not exactly the same reasons to others. If you take Mali, for an example, as an example in North Africa, you are looking at the situation that, firstly, the problem emerged from Libya, wherein there was a conflict which led to the killing of Gaddafi, and therefore created an insecurity in that region. And therefore it made a number of countries to suffer. So it's a tension that we had to deal with. As the continent, we tried to deal with that as the AU, even had a roadmap to deal with the matter. But unfortunately, there was a different approach from other countries outside of the continent, which led to a situation that we are dealing with now. That affected Mali, whether it's Chad, whether it's what you call the whole of the region, created, for an example, a favorable ground for what you could call today the kind of people who are troubling Nigeria, Boko Haram. It emerges from there, because it is important to say these tensions, where do they come from? Well, they haven't just mushroomed from nowhere. I think the questioner, for an example, mentions Burkina Faso. You know that Burkina Faso had a very unfortunate history. It is clear that when Sankara was overthrown, people of Burkina Faso, they just feared to oppose at the beginning, because it was a military coup. But I think what provoked it was when I think the president then was having ruled for perhaps for a few decades, was still wanting to continue. And that was what provoked the situation. In a sense, saying, people are saying, enough to strong men. We are ready to take up our own whatever, to fight that, which is a positive thing in a way. What they're saying, you can no longer continue like the old way. I'm just saying these tensions are not exactly the same, identical. If you take Burundi, Burundi has been in peace with itself. What has caused a problem? That the president felt he hasn't done his 2 terms, he needs still to do it. And people believe he has done it. That has caused a problem. Now, what do you do? All you can do is to engage our colleagues and talk and try to engage, as we've been doing, and say, if we have agreed that there should be 2 terms, respect it when it comes, respect to our own constitution, so that we don't cause problems. Central Africa had different kind of situation. As you know, there was a president there, people rose against him, and it caused a conflict that caused a big problem. So I'm saying the tensions are not the same. And yet, unlike before, Africa has said we cannot tolerate any coup d'etat anymore. And indeed, coup d'etats have disappeared. Even the ones, a little bit bubble that there was an attempt there. People know you can no longer just come a strong man. I think that in itself indicates we're doing something. We need to do more in order to ensure that we don't have such, because if there are wars or violence, it is the young people who suffer in the main. Instead of them being educated, being prepared for the future, they are made to fight the wars. This is not acceptable by the AU. The AU has moved, for an example, to establish a special force that if a problem begins in any other place, we should take it as our own, as in the same family. We'll move immediately, deal with it, and bring justice. Now, but we wouldn't go to that at the beginning. We would want to engage. That is why even on the issue of Burundi, there's been a few meetings to discuss that. And that's why we've reached a point to extend or postpone the date of the elections so that we can discuss rather than go to war. At least for the fact that we can do this today, it shows that Africa has moved. In the past, people would do their own things in their own places. And it would be very difficult to come in. Today, regions are able to move and discuss. We're not yet perfect, but we're trying our level best. But this business of us agreeing to serve 2 terms and then only to realize that 10 years is too short is a problem. It's a problem. Thank you very much.
We have unfortunately run out of time, and instead of making a summary, I first have to apologize with all those who had additional questions. But in order to, instead of making a summary, let's imagine we are celebrating now 25 years, and let's imagine we 3 would sit here in another 25 years, which means in 2040, and you had 3 wishes, each of you, to be accomplished by 2040. what would be for Africa? What would be the three wishes? And only, I would say, 10 seconds per wish. So, Vice President.
Sorry, I didn't get the full question. How do we see Africa in the next 25 years?
But very short answers. Three wishes. Three wishes.
Well, it's already started. The economies are growing very fast. There's a lot of dynamism in the society, thriving economic activity that's taking place. So the transformation is taking place within our very eyes. We don't see it because we are so close to it. And that transformation will continue, and Africa will become the emerging economic power.
Thank you. President.
Well, thank you very much. We would like, by 2040, to see Africa industrialized. We want to see Africa fully beneficiating its own resources and therefore having created more jobs. We'd like to see Africa interconnected through the infrastructure, the road, rail, the air. We'd like Africa to look like indeed one unit with economic activities that will be one of the regions that should be leading the world, with the youth being part of the leadership, making Africa to move to a more prosperous continent of Africa. That's what we'll be wanting to see.
I just wanted to say, let's express through our applause that those wishes are fulfilled. Now, may I ask you to be seated, to remain seated? First, I want to thank President Zuma, Mr. Vice President, again, for your honest answers to.
That was President Jacob Zuma giving his wish list for Africa. He was asked for that by Professor Klaus Schwab, of course, the founder of the World Economic Forum. And if you've just tuned in, I'm with Mzwayi Mbeje, presidential correspondent for the SABC. And let's just run through this very important plenary session, the opening, the official opening of these World Economic Forum meetings on Africa in Cape Town. And Schwab actually started quite nostalgic. If you agree with me, he's looking back on 25 years that meetings have been held in Africa. I'm sure you know, Mzwayi, the first meeting in 1990, and that was only after Nelson Mandela was released. So there is this history between the World Economic Forum and South Africa. It was only after that regular meetings started to be held about Southern Africa, then focusing on the whole of Africa. Schwab spoke about that meeting in Davos in 1992 when Nelson Mandela went, and of course he's famous for saying that was decisive in changing his mind about economic policy. The ANC then thereafter moving more towards privatization. Let's look at some of the other things that came up. Zuma and the Vice President of Ghana speaking, looking at the history, at young people, and that was one of the questions posed to them because after the introduction they sat on a panel. And the big concern is this youth bulge in Africa. The figures announced again today: by 2050, 1 billion people, that's the population will swell to that size of working age people in Africa. Will we have the skills, the education, and the actual industries to give all these people jobs? That came forward, and Kwesi Amissah-Arthur, the Vice President of Ghana, was saying that we do have more democracy, we have more independent judiciaries, more gender equality. So saying that there's hope, but now we really have to look at education. 90% of Africans are going to school, but they're not going through the whole system. Schwab agreeing that education was key. We then moved to corruption, and I don't know if you want to get in here about some of the main points touched on.
Absolutely, Francis. One of the things that I think came out very strongly is good governance that relates to issues of corruption. You know, one of the things that has been stunting growth in Africa is corruption. I mean, we have resources here, but the way people have been going about, there's been a lot of corruption because we didn't have systems to prevent some of those things. And the other important thing that came out here, you can see that the African continent is actually worried about some of the issues affecting it, like diseases. So can we have better technologies? You heard how Ebola was fought by everyone. Can we have better technologies to make sure that we prevent this? And another hope is that constitutionality is one of those things that rings over and over again. That, you know, countries in Africa can't then just do as they used to do. We now are a community of nations within the world. We have to play by the rules. If, for example, your term ends, let's say 2 terms, like President Zuma was saying, so you must go. That's why we see problems in Burundi and we saw in Burkina Faso.
Well, let's touch on that. It seemed quite a strong acknowledgement from President Jacob Zuma that he does not condone what's happening in Burundi. He said that we've reached a point where we've postponed elections. So talking about this pressure on Pierre Nkurunziza to postpone those elections, and he did say that this shows that Africa has moved. So taking something positive, even though we're seeing unrest in Africa, he's saying what we're seeing is a change in the attitude towards those strong men. I like that word.
Absolutely. And you heard him say that there's also a special force that is being set up so that once all else fails, as a continent, we are able to move in to make sure that constitutionality is respected. I think that was very positive from this discussion.
Just a final thing, Klaus Schwab, I thought interestingly, said that Ebola is actually a positive sign coming out of Africa. The way it was handled, initially, I think there was a recognition that initially we weren't on top of that, but he said what could have been a global catastrophe was contained in Africa. And that's it from the World Economic Forum. Of course, we'll be dipping in and out throughout the day, but from us in Cape Town, that's a wrap. We take a short break.